Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is Judge Julian with the verdict. Now, the topic of discussion today is how effective is foreign aid in the developing world? Now, I know what you're thinking. That's a huge, vast question. What kind of aid? What kind of development? But worry not, that's all been taken into account. Today, I'm not going to be talking about humanitarian aid, but more about economic aid targeted at long term, sustainable economic development, reducing poverty, and modernizing industries. Some arguments may involve social or human or political development as well, but we'll be able to link them in once we get there. On face value, financial aid being transferred between either governments or from NGOs or private investors should do nothing but help boost the productivity of an economy. For a range of reasons, however, sometimes impact of foreign aid can be limited and in some cases even reversed, working to the detriment of the receiving country. We're going to take a look at some of these reasons. Reason number one is bad conditionality. Now, one of the most prominent hurdles or perceived hurdles to economic aid is the attachment of conditionality, which is effectively conditions that are required to be met by the recipient as a result of receiving aid, often imposed by the IMF or the World Bank. Whilst it is understandable that donors would want some assurances over the use of their money, many conditions often involve economic policies and reforms that are just not suited to the economy and the economic climate of the countries receiving. An example of this was a recent IMF aid program in Argentina, where funds were subject to cuts in government spending on healthcare, education, and social security. Now, with many public sector workers in Argentina, this fiscal tightening went against the goal of reducing poverty by actually making households worse off. Other policies often included in conditions involve free trade and reducing tariffs on imports in the hope of making imports used in production less costly and therefore boosting exports and making them more competitive on the global market. However, again, this doesn't always work, and the influx of foreign goods can be damaging to domestic companies. This highlights one of the main issues that people have with conditionality. It seems to be designed to benefit the donors and their country's interests more so than that of the developing nation. Point number two is poor governance. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning, some points are going to align a little bit with political development, and this is one of those cases. Now, the three main branches of development are either economic, social or human, and then political. Now, all three are intertwined, but there are debates as to which should be prioritized. And the next point is probably going to suggest that political development should be prioritized, as a lack of political development has made economic aid less effective in some cases. Economic policy and plans on how to spend funds from economic aid require decisions to be made by governments. This requires strong and decisive government institutions. Now, this is not necessarily to suggest that the conditions are a positive aspect of economic aid. But if you want to give them a fair chance of working, it's important that there is a strong political system in place to implement them. Now, not every aspect of conditionality, of course, is going to be bad, but the good ones need to be well implemented. Many developing countries have suffered from this lack of political development, and the effect of economic aid has therefore been held back. Some see political development purely as an emergence of democracy, but honestly, this doesn't have to be the case. And perhaps this idea is what's holding back development. Any political institution which is capable of comprehensively implementing positively effective policy is well developed, and this often isn't a democracy, which can involve lengthy, half-hearted decision making. So to summarize that point, whether democratic or not, weak political institutions can lead to poor use of economic aid. Another well-documented hurdle to any form of aid is the third point, which is corruption. Now, I've separated this point from poor governance because that was more a case of weak institutions or weak leadership just being incapable of making good use of aid. Corruption, however, doesn't say a lot about the leaders' capability, but more about their conscious choices which go on to hinder their countries. Now, corruption is not uncommon in developing countries who receive economic aid. Although more diversified these days, aid tends to go directly to governments, and this gives government officials the opportunity to embezzle money or spend it unfittingly with the public being unaware. This money, which should be used to fund economic projects and subsidizing industries or improving deficits, is unfortunately being used to line the pockets of corrupt officials. Economics Nobel Prize winner Angus Deaton suggested that foreign aid further distances leaders from their people, as they no longer require their taxes for finances. It is as if they no longer require their support, therefore not caring who they upset through corruption. Fourth and final point is aid dependency. Now, real long-term economic development requires sustainable industries that are able to withstand demand shocks and survive on their own without needing assistance. This, however, goes against the whole notion of economic aid, which is an active assistance to countries without the means to support their own economies. For example, Canada was providing economic aid to Tanzania at one point to fund a wheat growing project, with a plan to phase out aid within 5 years. After 30 years, however, the Tanzanian government was not able to fund what was a very unproductive project themselves, and Canada had continued paying aid for that whole time. If countries are constantly treated as if they cannot support themselves and know nothing but aid, how will they develop the ability to do so? To put it bluntly, economic aid is limited in a way by its own doing. So that's a brief summary of reasons why economic aid can prove to be ineffective. We've got ill-suited conditions to loans, poor governance and weak political institutions just not implementing policy properly or investing properly. We've got corruption effectively taking away the opportunity for effective investment. And finally, aid dependency, not allowing developing countries to get used to coping without aid. Now, I know it might all seem a bit doom and gloom, but there can be light at the end of the tunnel. Economic aid doesn't have the best track record, but with some improvements, perhaps it could move in the right direction. Some would suggest more microfinancing, targeting smaller local businesses and projects instead of entrusting national governments to deal with much bigger tasks. Others would suggest a more hands-off approach from donors in just leaving developing countries to work it out for themselves. This has been the case in China and other East Asian countries where there have been thriving modern industries and great reductions in poverty. Western involvement would be just to give fair trade deals to these countries and not to intervene with their policy. Right, thanks for watching, guys. That's the verdict. Hope you've enjoyed it.